So, I only have a couple of things to say story-wise, so we're actually going to do cover story first rather than second, which is the flip of how I usually do things. Because all I really have to talk about here is Rosalina and... oh god, I just looked up the name. Yoshiaki, that's it. Yoshiaki Koizumi. I wanted to make sure I pronounced that correctly. Who is the one who effectively designed the lore of Rosalina as a character. I hope you enjoyed this, because this is the only game Rosalina is a character in. Oh, she shows up in other games. She shows up in cameos or as playables in like Smash or Mario Kart. But the only point at which she's part of the narrative in any structure whatsoever is here. She's a bonus character in 3D World, and that's about as close as she gets to it. I'm kind of hoping we'll get something for her in the future, but you know how story in the Mario series go. It's usually just brief forays into it. But I do want to mention one thing. Her story and her storybook thing, first of all, are awesome. But I know a lot of people theorycraft about it. I tend to think of it more linearly because it's me and I'm boring. I think that she was someone who was a native of the Mushroom Kingdom within the Galaxy-verse, because it's kind of separate continuity-wise, and ended up, leaving with the Luma. And because Lumas are effectively the equivalent of fairies or sprites or spirits or whatever you want to call them, that's what elongated her life. That's what allowed her to continue to exist and subsist out in space without any particular issues, floating on this comet for however many millennia that she's been doing it for. And her taking in this surrogate, she's basically become the star version of Gaia, right? She takes over the Lumas, who go out and make the new stars, and then, new Lumas come to her, and she takes care of them, so they go out to be new stars. She just kind of caretakes the cosmos, which I'm with that. I like that. I don't think there's any direct connection between her and anything else. I don't think she's Luigi's daughter. I don't think that she's romantically attached to anyone, whatever. But I do want to say one thing. One of those strange little tidbits in fiction is how to present death. Because there's a lot of ways to do that, and the most simplest and obvious is to show a corpse or to say, they died. Those are the two most overt and obvious. But one of the things I found fascinating, it's not a very common trait, is every now and again fiction will do something to showcase someone passing away, dying, or whatever, in a way that's allegorical or metaphorical, however you want to think of that. I guess metaphor would be a better word. And does a very good job of it, and this game is a good example of that. The idea that her mother just wasn't here anymore. Her mother is now sleeping under the tree. That's all she has to say, but it gets across the idea very clearly that her mother died before she even started this journey with the Lumas in general. So that's very well done, and I wanted to give praise to that. The whole storybook's fantastic. Some definite feels there, and some definite excellent stuff. It's a shame we don't see more of that level of storytelling within Mario in general. But I've talked about that too much. Let's move on to gameplay, because this is going to be a predominantly gameplay video, which is okay. I've done that before. After all, lore runner has always supposed to have been both sides of the equation, right? Lore is obvious, but runner is the making of, the gameplay, the design, etc. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the nitty-gritty because I'm not actually an essay channel. This is a rumination, after all. But I do want to gush about this game. Let me start with a little bit of a factoid. The net score gameplay for this game was 19, which makes it tied for the third highest rated gameplay of any game I've ever reviewed. Third, surpassing Super Metroid. The only ones that are definitively above it is Shovel Knight, which includes all the expansions, and Mario Odyssey. This is a very fun game, and I want to give special and definitive praise on why that is. Let's use these ones. To these. We were playing the Switch version, to be clear. Now, it's not a big change. It's not. But I do think that using the gyroscopic thing, the gravity, whatever it's called thing, instead of the pointer was better in every way. And I think having a button, in this case Y or X, depending on your preference, as the waggle instead of literally the waggle, although you can do the waggle as an option, was better in every way. It allows so much more precision and so much less frustration. Now, it's possible, unlikely, but possible that I'm just better at video games than I used to be. It's also possible that the controls are that much better, but there were many stars in this game that I remember giving me and my friend a huge amount of trouble back in the day when we played this on the Wii, that I just breezed through this time on the Switch. Oh, there were still a couple of issues, and I did die several times, but I was sitting on a net lives of 99 because I was just smashing stars out of the way. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because stars that I remember like, oh god, I spent hours on this, I would get in like 2 or 3 tries. Some of that's in the highlight reel even. So I do think the improvement to controls is a substantial improvement, and I wanted to say that because if for no other reason, I think that's worthwhile, because Mario Galaxy is an excellent game that I think people should be capable of enjoying, in my opinion. The game does a lot of things right, though. Obviously, it does proper tutorialization, as most Mario games do. Mario games tend to put an enormous amount of polish into the first level or first bundle of levels in just about any Mario game. You know, 1-1 in Mario 1 is something I've done an entire essay on, and I know I'm not the only one on that one. You know, Mario 2 and in the design of it thing, Mario 3, Mario World, Mario 64, Bob-omb Battlefield, which introduces us to everything. Of course, Mario Odyssey did that as well. There's a lot of elements of here's how the game works, here's how the game plays, here's what you can do, here's how you can interact with things, and all of it's just there. And they use visual tricks. Check this out. I wrote down a couple here to look at. So there's 3 visual tricks I wanted to share with you that I love. This just quiet, beautiful tutorialization without having a pop-up that says here's what you need to do. Now it's worth noting in almost every case the pop-ups are still there. They're just optional. There's like a toad or a billboard that you can go talk to and say, here's what you do. But if you don't look at that, you can just look at the terrain and you could see a ground pound icon. Now, you jump up, you smash down on it. It looks like a little explosion thing, and we've already established that that's how that works. Now, these ground pound things, there's nothing there. There's no coins, there's no special unlocks, there's no one-ups, there's nothing. They're just there to tell you that you should ground pound here. Why? Because there's these moles patrolling right by them. And those moles are defeated by ground pounding first, which knocks them out of their hole, and then hitting them after they're out. You see the brilliance of it? It's so simple, really, and I feel almost silly saying this, but I just gush about this kind of tutorialization in gameplay design. Because a player who doesn't know anything and has never played this game is going to see that and be like, oh, I should ground pound that skunk, and it's going to knock out a mole, which means they will then see in action how to defeat the moles going forward, which is also tutorialization for the boss coming up, too. There's a lot of that, too. The World of Warcraft design thing where the trash is designed to tutorialize you for the bosses. I could segue into the bosses here, but I want to keep talking about tutorialization. My second one, like I said, I had 3 examples. My second one was the spigots. So you get the frost flower, and it allows you to shoot the frost flowers, frost balls, I don't know what to call that, which is awesome, of course, but it also allows you to walk and skate on water as if it was solid. And the skating mechanic by itself is something I'd love to gush about. It increases your speed, it changes the direction and thrust of your jump, and it gives you more precision and control while on the ice, which has been a problem with any video game ever with ice physics. So having that kind of thing on ice is awesome, I just gotta say. And you can toggle in and out of doing the skating mode at will, which is just fantastic. But when you get your first frost flower, there's a spigot immediately under it. So you get the flower, you fall into the spigot, and the water it's pushing out turns into a platform. You now know that you can stand on those spigots. No tutorial. Well, I mean, that is a tutorial. No billboard, no pop-up, no, hey, Zero, can you hear me? I want to tell you about spigots. No, instead, it's just there, you do it, and now you instantly understand how to do it in the future. Third example. This is a fun and simple one. There's a platform, I think this is on the Dreadnought stage, much further into the game. And it's a very large platform, and there's these stylized rings on it, which look like patterns of like a blueprint almost, or something like that. Very normal, very natural looking. But if you pay attention, at the center of each ring is one of those pulse things. And if you go into the ring, the pulse goes out and reaches out to the end of the ring, and then stops. You now know, immediately upon seeing that, what the danger zones are and where they're going to intersect. And it starts off with a danger zone off to the side, and a safe path, and then they start intersecting and make it so you have to actually dodge stuff. That kind of stuff is everywhere. I just spent like the last 2 or 3 minutes talking about just those 3 examples. There's dozens of examples of that kind of brilliant tutorialization in this game, which is one of the reasons I gush about it so much. Another thing they do is exploration indication, which I know is kind of a mouthful, but exploration indication is a term I came up with over in the Metroid series. It's also a Zelda kind of a thing. It's when there's elements of the design, usually of the level design specifically, that inform you of where you should go looking. Let me try to explain that a little bit. In Zelda 1, there's a lot of secrets that there's no hints for, right? You just need to try everything everywhere, and then eventually you'll stumble onto something. There's like 8, 9, 10 secrets that there's no indicators for, right? In later Zeldas, they would use exploration indication. Maybe there's a crack in the wall. Maybe there's a line of grass going up to something you can ram into. Maybe there's enemies in a specific area that can be defeated by something that will unlock something like that. Maybe there's some discoloration on it, which makes you think, that's a little bit different than the nearby walls, and so forth and so on. You could probably think of examples of this if you think about it for just a moment. And again, I think Zeldas and Metroids tend to do that very, very well. This game does that too, of course. Most Mario games do that with coins. You see if you're jumping along and then you see a path of coins that just goes up and to the left for some reason, it's like, oh, well, okay, there's something up there. This game does the coins as well, but it uses a lot of other tricks in similar thing to do that kind of exploration indication, giving you an idea that you should probably look in this direction. It is worth noting that it is a very hard balance to make that work, and I don't think this is the best exploration indication I've ever seen. But this is still very good, and I wanted to give it credit where credit is due. I said I'd talk about bosses. Usually when I think bosses in Mario games, I think, ugh, because, bosses aren't good in Mario games, right? Like they weren't in 1 or 2 or 3 or World. 64, I haven't reviewed that one yet, so I don't know. Not really great boss design, and bosses is usually what I tend to think of as the weak point of any Mario game. I was surprised by how fun the bosses were in this one. There's some repeats, but they varied up pretty substantially, and there's some good creativity in how you fight most of them. And I have to admit, I absolutely loved the Bowser 2 and final Bowser fights, which were just legit. I don't know how else to explain that. Using the sphere gravity mechanics in a way so that you rush around the planet and you try to make sure he lands on this, and really subtle stuff too, really little stuff that you wouldn't even think to note. Like for example, when you're fighting Bowser on most of the planetoids, the spheres that you fight him on, they're transparent. They're meshed actually, so you can see through them. Now, why is that significant? Because it means you can see where he is at any given point in time, without any other need for any other visual indicator. No targeting reticule necessary, no enemy outline, just you can see him through the mesh. Brilliant little things like that. Sorry, my nose is really itching today, that's why I keep scratching it, I apologize. Point being, the bosses I actually wrote down, we had Mega Leg, which was fun, Petey, Bowser, Camella, Twister Top, Bowser Jr., Armada, the Mole Dude, Baron Burr, Camella 2, Bowser 2, and Final Bowser. All of those bosses were very, very fun and very enjoyable. Now, I cannot gush enough about the level design. Mostly, it's focused on the individual levels, the challenge levels, if you will, because those challenge levels are awesome. I'm going to pick one, which is Matter Splatter. But all of them have something unique, some gimmick, some design element that makes it different and special regarding versus every other level in the game. Usually about creative usage of mechanics, so Matter Splatter, right? So there's this path, except most of it isn't there at any given point in time. It's fading away. However, there's these little splashes of light that literally act like water droplets that will bounce out, and each time they bounce, there's a little splatter of terrain that is now visible. And when I say visible, I mean interactable. If the terrain is invisible, then you fall. Sense makes it's not about visibility, it's about whether or not it's actually there or not. I know I'm explaining this terribly, but if you watch the level, you can see how beautifully, wonderfully creative this is, and how it encourages you to kind of plan out what you're doing and be very good under reflexes, and it changes the terrain substantially with just such a relatively small change. They do that all the time with the flip switch level, with the sweet level, with the honey climb level, Space Junk Galaxy, Battle Rock Galaxy, Ghostly Galaxy, Gusty Garden Galaxy, Freeze Flame, Melty Molten, and Dreadnought. All of those galaxies, I wrote down those names as well. All of those have wonderful, inventive, creative level design that take mechanics and just expand upon them, iterate. There's a lot of iteration within the individual game, which I wish I could just sit here and expound upon, but if I did, well, then I'd just be streaming the game again. At that point, you might as well just go watch the VOD, because I showed off all of this stuff. We only got 102? No. We got 116, I think, of the stars in our playthrough. We didn't get several of the purple stars, and we didn't do the Luigi playthrough, and I think that's it. So we 90%ed the playthrough. I showed off almost everything. And it was so much fun. I like how this game also gives you little hints and tidbits. Now, this is partially from Mario 64. Like, you could actually see it. You know, when you start a level, it's like, here's a little thing indicating what you have to do. They did that in Mario 64. They did that in Mario Sunshine. And there's a name for the level, which gives you a little bit of a hint, too. What I like on top of that I think Mario Galaxy innovated, was when you're at the level select, it will give you some kind of indicator for secret stars. Only if you've already beaten the level, though. So if you finish the 3 core stars, it'll then pop up and say, well, there's a 4th slot, or a comet slot, or both. And if you're like, well, okay, we'll select the level, and then there'll be a little question mark by one of the existing things saying, this is where you need to go for the hidden star. Little tidbits like that kind of give you a direction, and this is kind of part of the exploration indication thing as well, because now you know which star you need to select in order to find the hidden star. Just stuff like that. And I don't want to gush too much. This game did have a couple of frustrating levels. Even with the improved controls, taking out the trash both times is just incredibly frustrating. And on the second time, you have 2 seconds of leeway. 2 out of 30. You have these bombs. You have 4 bombs. Each one detonates in 10 seconds. You have to throw 5 to 6 bombs, not counting speedrunner tactics, in order to take out all the trash. You do the math. What you have to do is you have to place them very specifically in a way that they will detonate each other in order to get through the trash quicker than otherwise they would, but not too far apart and not too close. You have to pretty much put them perfectly. I'd complain about that, and that was very frustrating, but there were indicators, little gold coins which you could find embedded in the ground, which indicated you should put a bomb here, to give you an idea of where to place them. Which that is something, and I'll give the game that. Also, the Daredevil challenges can go to hell. For those of you not aware, the Daredevil challenges are, you have 1 health. That's it. If you get hit, you're dead. And most of those were fine. In fact, I actually managed the Bouldergeist Oko mode, one-hit KO mode, in, I think, 2 tries, something like that, which is insane. I got lost on him for so long on the Wii version. And by lost, I mean it took me so long to beat him. This time it only took me 2 tries, but the one that really struck me was, it's one of the last ones where you have to go up the Melty Galaxy, and you have to go through the whole stage without getting hit, including the final gauntlet at the end, which is already kind of difficult. I managed that after, like, I think my 3rd or 4th attempt, which, again, is way better than the 2 solid hours I spent on it back in the day. What else could I gush about? The music. It is so rare that I will play a game, and the music will fire up, and I will just start to smile. That's not very common for me. I mean, I in the overall aggregate of games I've played, that's probably like 1% of a percent kind of a thing. But this game hit that. Just there are several levels where I just go and I would just, you know, and there's just this kind of, I don't want to say relief, just this kind of, that hits the spot kind of a feeling. You know what I mean? When the music fires up and it just, ooh. We had a thing where we were going through naming our favorite songs. I kept waiting for my favorite song to play. Turns out that song's in Galaxy 2, and I'm a moron. So my favorite song in this one is probably the Gusty Garden one. It's just, oh my god, it is so uplifting and boisterous. It is the main theme of Galaxy, kind of remixed. Wonderful, wonderful job. I also want to give final credit to the gravity mechanic, which is obviously the big gimmick of this game. And I want to mention that in specific because I want to kind of add an addendum at the end here. The gravity is, of course, the main gimmick of the game, and the way they do it is actually quite fun. See, there's gravity zones. If you were to pick apart the code, you can physically see this area has this gravity well. And so anytime you're anywhere within this area, you will gravitate towards this. Now, it's not a linear thing. You can sway back in and out depending on your momentum, but that's how they design it. This then leads to some interesting situations, and of course speedrunners can abuse that by jumping way farther than they should be able to get into another gravity zone. But there's also some really fun and interesting stuff you can do with that if you know what you're doing. Sending yourself into orbit, or trying to jump out of the way, or spin jumping in order to switch into another thing, or doing the backflip spin jump in order to get out of the way of an enemy, or whatever. And of course, a lot of the levels use this gravity mechanic, and as part of the level design, ignoring the obvious thing where the gravity would be shifted based on the area you're in. There's also the beams of light, which generate gravity as you're looking down at them. There's also really small planetoids, which you can land on or use the grapple beams to get through. I could go on, but again, at that point, you might as well just watch the VOD. I'm not trying to plug the stream. I'm just saying, at a certain point, I'm just going to actually be listing all of the content. And again, that's what the VOD's for. That's what the stream's for. Creativity, wonderful innovation, beautiful music, a heartwarming story, fantastic controls, excellent level design, fun bosses, plus 19 to gameplay, which again is tied for our third highest game we've ever reviewed on the gameplay axis. Absolutely deserve it. But I said I wanted an addendum right at the end here. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts, as I always would. The first thing I have is a question for you. Most of you obviously don't go through and analyze and re-examine your opinions on games like I tend to, and that's fine. Obviously, this is something I like to do even regardless of the show. You know, going back through analysis mode has unveiled my opinion and shown how my opinion has changed over the years about a lot of things, about Star Trek, about movies, about games. This is the second best Mario 3D game I've ever reviewed, but I've also only reviewed 2 of them. By memory, I would not place this high. This game is actually a lot better than I thought. What would you place as your favorite 3D Mario? And I'm going to specify, not your mainline Mario, not your Mario in general, which would include the Paper Marios, not your platformer Marios, which would include like Mario World and Yoshi's Island. 3D Mario, from 64 onwards, kind of a thing. Which would you place as your favorite? I'm actually quite curious because I've heard a lot of different responses to that. And if you asked me a few years ago, I'd say Galaxy 2. If you asked me a little bit after that, I'd say 3D World. And if you asked me a little bit after that, I would have said Odyssey. I never would have said Galaxy 1. I'm very curious if Galaxy 2, which we'll be reviewing tomorrow, by the way, is actually going to hold up on this one. I don't know. But that's my final point. See, the big thing, and I will talk about this when I review the Rumination on Galaxy 2, is Galaxy 2 is an expansion pack. Galaxy 2 would not exist without Galaxy 1 and its innovation. And I do want to give that special credit to Galaxy 1 for taking its idea and really running with it. We will see how the level design and the creativity stand up when we get to Galaxy 2 tomorrow. I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts, guys. I will, of course, be looking forward to your comments. And, wrong one. And I'll be seeing you next time.